When you think of the most important names in the car industry, who do you think of? Henry Ford, Ayrton Senna, Ferruccio Lamborghini? All those dudes are legendary in their own way. But what if I told you that the most influential figure in the world of cars didn't sell cars, and he certainly didn't build cars? He did this. Kazunori Yamauchi might be the most influential person in the automotive industry, because he gave millions of people like you and me access to every dream car in the world, and he did it without a single person knowing his name. He's the man who made Gran Turismo, but making the world's greatest racing game wasn't actually his plan. It turns out it was sort of a happy accident because Kazunori Yamauchi had a different dream. He wanted to make movies. As a typical kid in 1970s Japan, Kazunori spent his days reading books and learning about anything and everything. But his real education? Well, that happened in the passenger seat of his dad's car. His father was a salesman, traveling all over the small city of Kashiwa, selling his wares door to door. And it was on those long drives, looking out the window, that young Kazunori discovered a new passion: cars. If you got kids, you know how it starts, with all the questions. Dad, what kind of car is that? What about that one? Is that one fast? Is our car fast? Where can I join the Albon Discord? It's linked below the subscribe button. And very quickly, Kazunori's daily observations became his core memories. Every model, every badge, every design cue burned into his mind. The kid became obsessed. But then came high school, and cars slowly faded into just another hobby, because he had just found a new obsession, one that would launch him into his future career, filmmaking. It consumed him just like cars did all those years ago. But if there's one thing that we can take away from this video, it's that cars are a lifetime passion for people like us. Because to car enthusiasts, cars weren't just machines. They had character, they had a presence. They were characters in the movie of life, just like anyone else. And a young Kazunori was about to find out exactly what that meant, because Kazunori got his driver's license. And the realization hit him there was something even better than just liking cars, and that was driving them. But then there's something even better than that. The sponsor of today's video, War Thunder. War Thunder is an epic, free-to-play, military multiplayer action game where you battle head-to-head in land, sea, and air vehicles. Take control of a massive range of battleships, fighter planes, helicopters, and tanks. From the mid-20th century to the present day, every single vehicle is unique, with different weapons and dynamics. And this isn't your regular shoot-'em-up. War Thunder is about team strategy to take over enemy bases. And when you get into a firefight, War Thunder's unique damage model means every hit needs to be precise. Hit a tank's tracks to stop their advance, blast through a plane's fuel tank to cause a fire, pierce through a battleship at its exact weakest point. And with each win, you get the resources to upgrade and modify your monster machines, and make them your own with custom skins and visual tweaks. It doesn't matter what system you play on. War Thunder is available on Xbox, PlayStation, and PC Plus. With the later Storm Warning update, War Thunder now supports full ray tracing, with ultra-realistic lighting, reflections, and shadows, not to mention all the new advanced military vehicles. And oh yeah, did I mention? You can download War Thunder for free by using the link in the description. New players and returning players who haven't played for half a year or more will receive some special bonuses. 100,000 Silver Lions, a special decorator, Eagle of Valor, and more. And of course, you can also fully immerse yourself on the go with War Thunder Mobile. Download and play it for free on iOS or Android using the link in the description. Most kids start off with a hand-me-down sedan or something practical to get their footing. I had a 1999 Toyota Avalon, but not Kazunori, his first car, a Toyota Celica XX, what we call the first generation Celica Supra in America. And for Kazunori, that car wasn't just transportation, it was freedom, it was adrenaline, and young Kaz couldn't get enough. He honed that Celica around the city wherever he could get away with it, learning its limits, understanding how a car feels when it moves, how the chassis responds to every input. See where this is going yet? That feeling, the connection between man and car, that was burning inside of Kazunori. And with aspirations of being a filmmaker, that relationship between a driver and their car would become the foundation for his life's work. Because soon, Kazunori-san wouldn't just drive cars, he would create a world where anyone could drive them. But that is a story for later in this video. Because little Kazunori would have no damn clue what we were talking about yet. As a young adult, cars were still just a hobby. And his real passion, the one that was going to pay the bills, was filmmaking. Of course, that didn't stop him doing what every car guy dreams of doing. As a 24-year-old, he walked into a dealership and bought his first big boy car. And not just any car, a brand new Nissan Skyline R32 GTI-R. Also, like many 20-something-year-olds, He signed his life away to a 5-year loan. And while Dave Ramsey would have had an aneurysm. For Kazunori, this wasn't just a car. It was his dream car, the one that would steal his heart forever. Which is why, my friends, you'll see $147 different versions of the same GTRs every time you load up Gran Turismo. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because the love story between Kazunori and his GTR, well, it's not a love story at all, it's a tragedy. 6 months into ownership, Kaz was flying down the road at 200 kilometers per hour, or 124 miles per hour. And then, in the blink of an eye, everything went wrong. He crashed. Hard. Thankfully, he wasn't too badly injured, but the worst part? No insurance. He hadn't got around to it yet. Which meant he still had 54 months of payments still left to make, and no GTR to show for it. It was a nightmare scenario for anyone, and for Kazunori. The only way out was to put his head down and work his tail off to pay it off. Now, around the same time that Kaz lost his GTR, Sony had made headlines worldwide. Japan's Sony had just purchased America's movie giant, Columbia Pictures, for $3.4 billion. And if Sony was going all in on film production in Kazunori's backyard, then of course that's where he was going to apply. And well, he got the job. Boring office scene here? But there was one problem. Sony didn't hire him to make movies like he had thought. Nope, they placed him in a department he didn't even know about video games. You see, Sony had just entered the gaming industry and were building a console to compete with Nintendo, and they needed exclusive games to launch with this new console called the PlayStation. So that was Kazunori's new job. Not to make films, but develop games. But Kazunori wasn't fazed. He was a man on a mission and took this new role seriously, coming up with over 100 game concepts and ideas. Amongst those ideas was a simulation racing game, one that featured real cars and amazing physics. Light years beyond anything available on the market. It was called Gran Turismo. And the idea got rejected. Sony was not convinced, but they were curious about another concept on his list. A game was called MotorToon Grand Prix, a direct competitor to Nintendo's insanely successful Mario Kart. It was Sony's shot at a piece of the Nintendo pie, and well, it worked. The game was a hit in Japan, and it even got a sequel that went on to be a global release. Kazunori had earned Sony's trust, and with that trust, a blank check to develop any game he wanted. This time, Gran Turismo wasn't getting rejected. In fact, there was already a small team toying with the idea of the game while he worked on approval. But when it was fully greenlit, Kazunori was all in. Gran Turismo was his life. He would spend day and night working, he would sleep in the office. In one interview, he said he only knew it was winter because the office got colder, and that he estimated he was home only for about 4 days throughout the year. This man lived and breathed Gran Turismo for 5 years, and in 1997, the game would finally hit Japanese shelves. And, well, the reception was astounding. If you played the game yourself, you probably remember exactly where you were the first time you loaded it up. Let me paint the picture for you. There was no widely accessible internet. You couldn't YouTube an Albon video about JGTC cars. Spec sheets for cars weren't something you had memorized, unless you spent hours researching at the library, until, of course, Gran Turismo. When you loaded up that game, you learned about Silvia Qs or Castrol Supras or A-Spec RX-7s because the game gave you a history lesson in car culture. And then after you read through the history lessons and specs, you got behind the wheel of it in the first 3D racing game with real-life physics simulations. It was a groundbreaking way to race cars, more realistic than anything that came before it. And sure, the games you play on your phone now are light years better, but this was in the late 90s. Kazunori-san and his team took a serious risk making a game like this. Racing games are everywhere now. But back then, this was insanely niche. You had to love cars. You had to love car racing. And on top of that, you also had to be an absolute nerd about all the details and intricacies of those cars. The kind of person that obsessed over lap records, the kind of person that fell in love with racing lore, the kind of person that saw cars as living, breathing beings. Kazunori may have become a game developer, but at heart, he was still a filmmaker, and Gran Turismo was his medium to capture the feelings that swirled inside him since he was a kid, looking out the window of his dad's car. It wasn't just about driving, it was about capturing the soul of racing. Bringing the feel of the pavement, the thrust of a screaming engine, the rush of competition to people who had never felt those things before. End passionate sequence. All on a dang DualShock wired controller, 2 MB of RAM, and 16 bits of sound. And well, the madman did it. Except for maybe the sound part. In under a year, Gran Turismo sold 2 million copies in Japan alone. It ranked third behind Pokemon and Resident Evil 2, and within 2 years, it sold over 6 million copies worldwide. Today, that first Gran Turismo is the best-selling PS1 game of all time, with over 10.8 million copies sold. Too niche, the game was truly a masterpiece. If you never played it, you loaded up the game with a cinematic sequence of your GTR being unloaded off the trailer on race day. Then you skipped past arcade mode and loaded into the title mode, where you're given a map of the sacred grounds of 90s JDM, Tokyo, dealerships all around the city to buy your next car, or shops and car washes to update your current car. Don't know anything about your car? Go read about it in the game. And then finally, go race it up against other cars in your class. Where else could you find an answer to the Subaru versus Mitsubishi rivalry yourself in the late 90s? Kazunori nailed his vision with Gran Turismo, or so we thought, because it wouldn't be long until we find out that Kaz wasn't exactly fulfilled or even happy. But before we get to that, we have to zoom out a bit. Just like how Kazunori got a golden ticket with Sony, Sony had just found their golden boy. They handed him the keys to his own studio. The newly established Polyphony Digital Inc., still owned by Sony and PlayStation, of course, and in 1999, he made Gran Turismo 2 with way more cars, more tracks, and slightly better braking physics. Oh, and of course, the Suzuki Escudo Pikes Peak version, but otherwise the same recipe. And despite that game also being a success, Kaz felt like it wasn't living up to its potential. See, he had this theory as early as 2000, the theory that Gran Turismo, a freaking video game, could make you a better driver in real life. The theory that a lap in a game could be a substitute for a lap on a real racetrack. But Kazunori didn't have a way to prove it, not with the imitations of a controller on the PS1 or even the PS2. That is until 2008. GT Academy announcement. By this time, Gran Turismo 3 and 4 had come and gone, and the Sony PlayStation 3 was the most advanced video game console ever. And it was around then that Darren Cox, a former Nissan executive, came up with a brilliant idea. Sony and Nissan had an event a couple of years prior, where Gran Turismo gamers had the opportunity to compete for a real 350Z by winning races in the game and then on a real track. And Darren saw a correlation between the gamers' speeds virtually and their speeds actually driving on the track. And well, without realizing it, Darren had just unknowingly confirmed Kazunori's theory. So he led a new joint venture in 2008 between Sony and Nissan called GT Academy. And the idea was to allow anyone to compete in Gran Turismo for a real seat on a real racing team. Now, there were prereqs, of course. You had to be over 18, have a driver's license, and never have held an A-class racing license in the UK. And unfortunately for us Yankees, you had to live in one of the 12 participating European countries. Beyond that, all you had to do was download Gran Turismo 5 Prologue and enter yourself into the competition. Oh yeah, then of course, you had to put down one of the fastest lap times in the world to get invited to the next phase, where only 22 people were selected. Now I know, there was a significant barrier to entry. You needed a PS3, you needed Gran Turismo 5, and you needed a sim rig to be a top competitor. None of that is cheap, except you really didn't need any of that. Because Gran Turismo hosted live events all around Europe. Car shows, gaming conventions, tech events. You just had to look up where Gran Turismo was participating and show up. They had a full sim racing rig for you to use right there at the venue, so you could put down your fastest lap times. And if you were one of those lucky 22, the next stage was where things got harder for a gamer. You had to pass a physical exam, be tested on your endurance and vision. And then you were put behind the wheel of a Nissan 370Z to see if you had the basic instincts necessary. And if you made it through all that, then you were sent off to a racing camp to compete against the very best at Silverstone Raceway, where you had to compete in dogfights, stock car racing, traffic challenges, and pit stop challenges. You had to drive Zs, GTRs, Leafs, and even a Pulsar across the finish line. It was pretty grueling. It had to be. This wasn't a video game anymore. This was high speed, wheel-to-wheel racing. And if you made a mistake, it could be your last. The winner would be invited to Nissan's driver development program and would have the opportunity to work their way up the racing ladder. Take Lucas Ordóñez, for example, the winner of GT Academy's inaugural season. He raced in the GT4 European Cup season, taking a podium in his first race. Eventually, he raced at Le Mans, with his team taking second in class, and later first in class at the 24 Hours of Nürburgring in 2012. His driving partner for one of those races, Kazunori Yamauchi himself. Oh, did I not mention that part of Kazunori's life? Yeah, he ended up having a racing career too. But my point is that GT Academy was a success, and it proved that Kazunori was right from the very beginning. He just had to wait until the tech developed to prove it. Since 2008, GT Academy has grown beyond even what they imagined you might have seen the movie. Show Orlando Brown and say Lucas. But beyond GT Academy, Kazunori Yamauchi turned Polyphony Digital into something much bigger. What started as a small studio dedicated to making racing games ended up being a powerhouse in the automotive world. One so influential that real-world car manufacturers started coming to him for research and development. Take the R35 GTR, for example. That high-tech multifunction display, that wasn't designed by Nissan's in-house engineers. Polyphony Digital made me think about that for a second. A video game creator, someone who dreamt of GTRs as a kid, bought a GTR, crashed a GTR, and then made GTRs the halo car of his game, became the same man helping develop the technology inside the latest GTR. But to summarize his life there, that would be a travesty. Because Kaz wasn't just obsessed with cars, he was obsessed with driving them, remember? He often described racing as a kind of war. You prepare your weapon, you organize your team, and then you have the actual race. And people, they sometimes die. A little extreme, maybe, a little morbid. But Kazunori had always been a filmmaker at heart. His way of expressing ideas was theatrical, and he didn't just talk about racing, he lived it. He's raced everything from Spoontune Type Rs at Thunderhill to GTRs, ISFs, and M6 GT3s at the Nürburgring. Was he breaking records? No, but he was winning, securing best-in-class finishes multiple times. Kazunori lived exactly how he spoke. He loved cars, he loved driving, he loved filmmaking, and all of those passions combined to give us the A game that was my first step into loving those things. 2. Whether I was battling for first place at Trial Mountain or channeling my inner Larry Chen in photography mode, Kazunori's Gran Turismo had an impact on car culture that cannot be overstated. It set a new standard for what racing games could be. And when you think about it, would we have Need for Speed, Forza, Midnight Club, iRacing? Would any of them have reached the heights they did without Gran Turismo paving the way first? Kazunori Yamauchi didn't just make a racing game, he created the bridge for impressionable young kids like myself to cross into the world of lifelong car enthusiasts. Just like how car manufacturers created a bridge between your private data and their profits, which you can learn about by clicking on this video about how your data is being stolen. Thanks for watching, and thank you to War Thunder for sponsoring this video.